All right. Sorry, we're gonna real quick start it off right. I can't believe nobody did this before. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag. No, I'm kidding. Pretty weird how we had to do that every single day in school, though, huh? Kind of culty, right? No, American schools, they're not doing anything weird. We're just gonna start off every day by saying a prayer to a rectangle. That's normal. American schools, they take kids every single day. They go, hey, before you can learn any facts about the world, I'm gonna need you to swear to fucking God that you will never betray America. You're like, well, I'm 7, so I don't have any current plans to commit treason. And I definitely don't know what the word indivisible means, but I'm down for whatever, because I'm trying to get these stickers, right? Sorry I started off political. Some people don't like that. Because I think I'll be saying something normal. I'm like, I think everyone should have equal rights. And they're like, oh, you worship Satan. And it's weird. I only have 2 political opinions I'll say in front of strangers now, because I think we can all get behind them. First, I think that Congress and the Supreme Court should have term limits. Secondly, yeah, thank you. Secondly, I think the president should be a magician. Right? President's always some normal dude. How you gonna tell me it's best for the country? You can't even tell me what card I'm thinking of, bro. This is the most powerful job in the world. You should have some, like, actual powers. But no, we got a bunch of regular, normal, mostly white dudes. Fucking Joe, Bill, George, Lil George. Where's our President Mysterion, who, he'd be at the press conference, we'd be like grilling him, right? We'd be like, Mr. President, you said you'd have a plan to curb inflation by now. Now, where is that plan? He's just like, check your back pocket. It should be required. If you're even gonna run, you should have to be a magician. Like, Lincoln's hat was big enough to fit a rabbit. He never pulled one out. That's bullshit. And then when the bad stuff happens, it's not so bad, right? Like JFK gets assassinated, his head explodes, but then a bunch of doves fly out. We're like, yo! Jackie's there covered in blood, like, ta-da! Everybody's like, yo, was there a second shooter? But we'll never know, because a magician never reveals his secrets. I came up with that because I was watching mushrooms. Watching mushrooms? Doing mushrooms. On them right now. I was doing mushrooms and watching the History Channel, and it's fun. I'm a psychedelics fan. I like psychedelics. Are we psychedelics people? Yeah. Okay. I like psychedelics. I was doing this thing where I did acid and I got on the L train in Chicago. It was a mistake. Because one day I was tripping and this drunk dude came on the train and his whole entire ass was out, you guys. Yeah, like the whole thing. And I'm like, I don't want to look at ass. Because I'm tripping, right? You're supposed to look at lava lamps and sunsets. You're not supposed to look at a grown man's dirty ass. But I started thinking about it deeper because I was tripping. I'm like, technically, I'm not looking at ass. Technically, what I'm looking at is billions and billions of cells. Made up of billions and billions of atoms. And you know what? I'm not even looking at that. What I'm looking at is the light traveled 90,000 miles, bounced off that ass, into my eye, into my brain, creating a picture of an ass. And I was so high that out loud to everybody on the train, I was like, that ass is amazing. That's why I like drugs, dude. They change your perspective. I go to work, I'm high, I'm late. My boss is like, oh, you're late. I'm like, oh, well, I used to be a sperm, so. You're lucky I made it here at all. Right? Statistically, I should have ended up in a Kleenex. That's just true. You guys ever think about that? That's weird. I used to be a sperm, now I bank with Chase. What the fuck? After I was a sperm, weird transition. After I was a sperm, I was adopted by white people as a baby. That's half of what's wrong with me. People ask me what it was like to be raised by white people. I'm like, I don't know, I have fun. Right, I'd get in trouble. I'd be like, you can't hit me, that's a hate crime, you know? My dad's like, give me my belt. I'm like, give me Al Sharpton, bitch. What you trying to do? They try to send me to timeout. Be like, go to timeout. I'm like, oh, interesting. Did you know that a disproportionate amount of the people incarcerated within timeout in this household? African Americans. Here's the thing about white parents nobody tells you. White parents hate it when you sing Negro spirituals just because you have to do chores. They hate that. Straight up, I'd be unloading the dishwasher, I'd be like, swing low, sweet chariot. They tried though. They were white, but they knew their black son needed to have access to black culture in America, so they tried their best. So we celebrated Kwanzaa, just like none of the black families in America. And I want everybody here, I need you to picture it, right? It's me, little black child, 2 adult white people, all 3 of us just wearing full African dashikis. Even as a kid, I was like, are you sure we should be doing this? My mom was looking like Nancy Pelosi in that bitch, I swear to God. They would go too far. One time, my white mom, she sat me down. She was like, Skyler, just so you know, there's this word that people use in reference to black people. It's a very racist word. It's called a racial slur. It's called the N-word. And you should never say it. You should never say the N-word. I looked at my mom. I was like, no, nigga, you should never say it. It's the thing. Sometimes I run into racism when I'm not expecting it, right? Like, I was in, like, the woke, sort of liberal snowflake part of town at a coffee shop. It was called a Starcucks or whatever. And I was writing on my laptop, minding my own business. There was a black man sitting to my right, minding his own damn black business. And there's a white woman sitting across from us, also on her laptop. And she had that moment where you stand up and you gotta ask somebody to, like, watch your laptop. You become like a little lord of your things, right? You look around, you go, who among these strangers is worthy to guard my laptop? And it's always whoever's closest to you, right? And she stands up and she makes eye contact with me for a very long time. And then she looks to the black man sitting to the table to my right. And then she makes a choice to turn around and ask another white person sitting way further away than us if he could watch her laptop. And this dude, I could tell he didn't want to say yes because he knew what was going on, but he was like, oh, it's either this or recite a Maya Angelou poem. So this woman goes to the bathroom, right? I'm sitting there in this like weird, like racial tension. I'm like, wow, she just saw that we were black and just assumed that we would take her laptop. Like, I can't let this stand. I got to teach everybody a lesson right now. If she's going to see black, I'll show her black. Right? So I wait for her to come back from the bathroom, sit back down in front of her laptop, which is when I stand up in front of my laptop. And I make eye contact with her, same way she did with me. And then as soon as we make eye contact, I turn to the black man to my right, I go, hey, brother. Hey, my fellow black strong brother. My fellow melanin king. Out here overcoming the chains of oppression to shine like the diamonds of Mother Africa. Brother, I ask you, nay, I beseech you, brother, you are being beseeched. If you, as well as our ancestors, could turn a watchful Negro eye towards my laptop, because as we all know, there are some white devils out here that would like to steal our property the same way they stole our people as property all those years ago. What do you say, brother? And assalamu alaikum, by the way. And I just put this dude on the spot, right? Actually, I was thinking about it. I'm like, did he even see what was going on? I didn't know if he was aware of the situation. I might have just thrown a Black Panther surprise party on this man. But he did it. He played along perfectly. He didn't say anything. He just put his fist up real quick. All right, I've been Skyler Higley. Give it up for yourself.